PTA Global. I'm here in front of my Pro6, which is arguably one of the most diverse pieces of equipment in the industry today. Not only in the populations that can use it and the responses that it creates within the body, but also in the variety of movements and motions that can be performed utilizing the Pro6. And while that's very valuable to have all of those choices, it can also be very overwhelming and very daunting for users to try to pick and select the right motions for their particular workout. So what we'd like to do is combine the beauty of the PowerPlate Pro6 with the systems of PTA Global, and we'll talk about a system that we use called 3D checkpoints. The 3D checkpoints are founded on the principles of functional nomenclature from the Gray Institute. So we want to make sure we give proper respect to the Gray Institute, Gary Gray and his family, for what they've done and what they've created around motion and the three-dimensionality of motion. And we've utilized these concepts to create a very simple checkpoint system. And today we're going to go through and run through how this system and different components of this system make the PowerPlate a much more streamlined and effective tool when you're selecting and creating your choices and your motions. The first little mini system is beginning position. Now, by definition, a beginning position has a lot of power and influence over how the body moves. And when we look at motion, the definition of motion is transition from one position to another position. Let me say that again. The definition of motion is a transition from one position to another position. By that definition, the positions that you are in have a dramatic impact on the overall motion. So if we can create some very simple strategic systems around how we position ourselves on the PowerPlate, we can now have a massive impact on the response we get in our body and the variety that we can choose with in a systematic and organized fashion. We get three major components of beginning position. The first component we're going to look at relative to the beginning position is the actual position, the type of position that we're in. We have a standing position, so I can be in a standing upright position. From here I can be the two legs, or I can be on one leg. Another position I have is I can be in a seated position, kneeling, double kneeling, and half kneeling. The supine, where my feet could be up on the platform. I also have a prone position, where I can have my hands on the platform and or my feet could be on the platform. A sideline as well. So I have a standing, I have a seated, I have a kneeling, I have a supine, I have a prone, and I have a sideline. Once I have the position that I'm going to get in, I now have a variety of ways that I can manipulate that position. Here's how we're going to create a very simple system around that. So let's start with a very basic standing position. So in a standing position, on 2 feet, I have a lot of different options on how I position my feet. And every time I change the position of my feet, it changes how force is transferred to my body. Now, when we understand the cool thing about transmissibility of vibration through the body, we realize that transmissibility tells us that vibration seeks out the areas of the body that are under tension or that are pre-tensed. So every time I change my foot position, I change the pre-tension capacity of my tissues, which then allows the vibration to go into different areas. Very powerful concept. So let's look at this system. I have basically 3 points of reference for movement. I have the sagittal plane, front and back. I have the frontal plane, side to side, and I have rotation, or the transverse plane. So my feet can be manipulated in the sagittal plane, so I can stagger them with a right foot forward or a left foot forward, so an R or an L. I have changes in the frontal plane, which I can go wide, W, or in, narrow. And I also have changes in the transverse plane, where I can go internally rotated, I, or externally rotated, E. There's 3 reference points in 3 different positions, or 6 different positions, 2 for each plane of motion. And then I have all the combinations of those. So if you see the chart, and you looked at the chart, you realize that in a symmetrical position, I have 27 different foot positions that I can stand on this plate. Each one creates a different response. Thanks to the Gray Institute for their development of that and understanding of how we can do that position. So I can have a wide stance or right foot forward, wide stance, externally rotated. I can have narrow, internally rotated. So I have all these different patterns that I can put myself on, whether I'm moving or whether I'm in a static position. It doesn't just work for my feet, it also works for the hands. So if I'm in a prone position, I can now do the same thing with my hands. I can have one hand forward, or the other hand forward, or go wide with external rotation, or one hand forward, wide with external rotation, or internally rotate, because that changes the transmissibility through my upper extremities, which changes the influence to the tissues. So now we have a system of what positions am I in, standing, seated, kneeling, supine, prone, sideline. What variation do I want to make to that position, which is, do I want to change the stagger in the sagittal plane, the width in the frontal plane, and the rotation in the transverse plane? And the third and final aspect of beginning position is, what's going to be my orientation relative to this machine? The cool part about the Pro6 is that it comes with cables. So I can not only change my position of the feet or my standing, but I can also change it relative to my cable. So if I'm holding one cable, I can face the cable, I can face away from the cable, I can have different staggered stance. So now I can change my position relative to the machine. So if I'm reaching here and holding on, that's a much different exercise than if I'm standing here and holding on. So just getting an understanding of how we can begin to manipulate our positions can create a massive influence on some of the basic exercises that we use on a daily basis. So a quick example is if I'm looking through my chart and I see that there's a static squat, I can simply do a static squat. But now I can static squat in a RXX or an R position with my right foot forward, or an L position, or a WE, wide externally rotated position, and every time I hold that static squat, I now have different forces transferring through my body because of transmissibility. Now if I bring in the cables, how I'm positioning in that static squat, if I'm holding my cables here in a static squat, and I have my feet neutral, that's one stress that's creating both from the vibration up and the vibration pulling down. But I can also change my position relative to the cables, and now I have a completely different stress through my system. So I can take, with just this beginning position system, I can take any exercise, whether it's basic, static, dynamic, complicated, and I can manipulate it and change it and always create a different stress through my body. I hope that helps with a little understanding of beginning position, how important it is relative to the Pro6. And you can take that, use that on your basic exercises, and open up a whole new world of motion, movement, and exercise for your body.